We got a new moon in Taurus coming out this week, y'all. Before we get to planting new seeds, there's going to be some tension in the sky to make sure that the seeds we are planting are actually ours and not just a reproduction of what we have been told we should want. And this is coming with this Mars and Pluto opposition alongside the Pluto-Sun square. So let's get into it, this astrological forecast week of April 23rd to 29th for Yappin with the Stars. So welcome to Yappin with the Stars. It's a show where I talk about life and spirit with the help of the planets, stars, and zodiacs. I am your host and guide, Nicole Rouse, anthropologist, astrologer, and artist, and this is Anthropology and Astrology My Way. Weekly shows are on Wednesdays, and this helps us check into the chaos that we call society and ask the cosmos for some guidance as we try to figure out what comes next. So what we're going to do this show is talk a little bit about what's going on this week, get into what does it mean what does kind of cardinal, fixed, immutable energy mean, because that'll help us make sense of these transits currently, and then talk about how we're seeing, or I'll talk about how I'm seeing this actually playing out on the ground and some strategies we can deploy moving forward to figure out what it is we need to do as a collective to ensure that we're not consumed by this kind of tide of chaos that is all around us, okay? So let's get into it. All right, the forecast this week, y'all, is red. It's red with new beginnings. So what do I mean by that? When you're looking at an astrology chart and you see those kind of lines in the middle, I talked about this last week, aspects, they can either be red or blue. And red tends to indicate tensions, blue tends to indicate harmony. We got red in the sky, y'all, that is interacting in kind of putting itself forefront over the kind of blue lines that would indicate more harmonious energy here. But tension, red lines are not necessarily bad. They are moments and points of growth. And growth is hard. Growth does not always feel good. We talk about the butterfly, right, all the time as an example of a metamorphosis going from one state to another. But we always forget that once a butterfly goes from a caterpillar into the butterfly, or a shades its skin, that process itself hurts. There's some pain. There is something that has to die or be released for something new to be created. So keep that in mind as we're talking about the transits this week and even going forward, because tension is required if we want change. And if change is already here, then instead of acting as if there won't be tension, if we understand that change involves tension, then how do we work with the tensions that are being presented to us individually and collectively? That's one way to think about what's going on this week. And I say that because we start the week off on the 23rd, right, with the sun squaring Pluto. Now, the sun is currently in Taurus. We are in Taurus season. Pluto's in Aquarius. We are going to be seeing the sun representing your ego, your sense of self, also the father figures, paternity, right? It is squaring off with Pluto, the lord of the underworld, the lord of death and transformation, the one that holds wealth, that understands that in order for power to maintain itself or even to come, there must be some kind of force. But that force usually does come, again, through a transformative death and rebirth, destruction and regeneration process. So what is being broken down? Well, the sun in Taurus and Pluto in Aquarius, there is a tension between we need as a collective and the infrastructures being able to actually support that. And I say that because Taurus rules things. It's a Venus-ruled sign, but it's Earth Venus. And it rules things like infrastructure, food, our pathways, the food pathways, how we actually get it. It rules things like the land itself, the body. It's the materiality of our existence. And Pluto in Aquarius, I've said this before and I'm going to keep on saying it, Pluto is the lord of the underworld who is ushering in the collective, Aquarius being the collective, right? The collective dead, but also us collectively. And Pluto's lessons are learned through death and transformation. So there is a way that collectively we as a society are feeling the impact of not having our basic needs met. And there is going to be a kind of squaring off between society and authority. And we're seeing this in different ways. And we're going to we've already been feeling this and seeing this, y'all, but it is building. And I think it needs to build because it's been a long time coming. The scripts and stories we've been told about society, about where we come from, our origins, where we're going, have all been revealing themselves to not be true, right? And this has been here for a while. We have seen the unraveling of these origin stories of things like where the nation state came from. So in the US, this idea that we are founded upon these ideals of freedom and democracy for all have completely unraveled because that is not actually true. How do you have a nation that says it is free and democratic for all, yet its economic basis and system is built upon the exploitation and dehumanization of people, right? The two don't make any sense. Those two things don't go hand in hand unless you shift the definition of what democracy and freedom mean and understand that how we may be defining it as a society is not the same as how the state defines it, because its understanding of democracy and freedom is through force, it is through violence, it is through the subjugation of others so that it can see itself as dominant. But collectively, we are realizing that don't really work for us. So I want you to think about that as we are seeing the sun square Pluto in fixed energy. And we're going to get into what this fixed cardinal mutable energy means, okay? But that is actually important. Now, at the same time, we're getting this sun square Pluto on the 23rd. On the 23rd, we're also getting an exact conjunction between Venus and the North Node in Pisces. So while we are having to face a harsh reality that maybe our basic needs are not being met and that the authority figures over us collectively are not necessarily trying to help us, we are also being asked to go into and really figure out what it is we do need. This is not just dreaming energy, right? In like an ephemeral way. This is energy asking us to go into our faith, into the kind of nebulousness of what we truly need and bring that shit into reality. Okay. And this is going to be more when Venus goes into Aries next week, and we'll get into that next week. But this is really setting the stage for us to understand that as structures around us are falling, right, there is a responsibility we do need to take as a collective to figure out what it is that we need. And if we can't imagine that, how the hell can we then make that a reality? So reality comes from dreams. Reality comes from imagination. Remember, we're living in the imagination of the colonial. The idea that we are living in the US in a free and democratic state for all, and this is the best country in the world, right? And that the American dream is one in which you can bootstrap yourself up and go ahead and become a millionaire, it's always been a fantasy. Right? That has always been something that has been fed back to us so that we give up our authority to a state via work so that our labor is benefiting somebody else and we maybe get some scraps at the table. Now, for a while that worked, but now it's not because the foundations of those ideas are coming undone. That was a fantasy that was fed to us for centuries, right? It was the imagination that we are living in of those who only saw their success being what was important. And that success depends upon the continual consumption and subjugation of others. And there's a cost to that, right? There's a literal cost to that. And so as we are having to understand the cost to this extraction, this is Uranus in Taurus, okay? So Uranus has been in Taurus for a while and will finally make its way into Gemini for a little bit in July, come back into Taurus, and then completely stay in Gemini next year going forward, right? This is the last of the outer planets changing signs. What Uranus in these last degrees of Taurus has really been doing is completely disrupting any idea that our structures and systems of not just governance, but of security and safety are really solid. Because Taurus rules things like security and safety, but none of this is secure or safe, right? So once Uranus went into Taurus, we started to see disruptions in supply chains. We started to see literally the earth shake, okay? Uranus is chaotic. It is exact. It is change, right? It is the higher octave of Mercury. So when it is in Taurus, Taurus being a fixed sign and the most fixed of the fixed signs in an earth, right? We are being asked to shake up the most foundational things that we have taken as true, whether they are true or not, because change is here. And in order for us to embrace change, we have to disrupt the things that can keep us complacent to and stagnant to what already is. And what if already is not working. And we have seen this, y'all. Again, not only the supply chains, but now we are also seeing the ways that our food in the US, and I know this is US centric, but I'm in the US right now. And so I'm using that as the example to draw upon. But we are seeing that now with the dismantling of these governmental structures that were in place and that we all thought would be in place that have completely been dismantled very quickly. The idea that this was always solid is completely now disrupted. And the idea that we are secure because we are safe in being able to rely upon the state is now disruptive. All these recalls, if we even get a recall, right, for food, we are seeing outbreaks of things like E. coli and other types of bacteria and fungi that would have been gone through safety and security checks if we would have had the same infrastructure, right? But Uranus disrupted that because it was never solid. So now that the reality is hitting us, what do we dream? What do we dream, y'all? We have to dream, right? And this is why it may feel so chaotic right now. If this feels I know it's chaotic, period. But if you are personally feeling like you can't find your feet and no matter where you turn, everything is chaotic, let me know in the show, like, let me know in the comments. But also I offer this. What if that is the point? Because the unmooring, right? The unsettling, the realization that the floor is shifty, that the floor is cracked. So the only way you can find a foundation is getting in your body and settling in what you need. Then the Sun square Pluto alongside Venus, North Node conjunction in Pisces makes a lot of sense because in the 24th, Venus then hangs out conjunct with Saturn directly. Now, I've talked about this last week. I've been saying that Saturn and Venus were going to be hanging out for a couple of weeks, right? So we are feeling this energy. And so this week, we are getting the kind of exact conjunction before Venus makes her way into Aries next week. So now with this exact conjunction, not only do you have the North Node and Venus asking us to have to kind of reevaluate and figure out what it is we're trying to go, so we have to dream and imagine this because Venus likes being in Pisces. It's exalted in Pisces. Venus can play and create and really get into her bag this way. Well, now when it meets up with Saturn, again, this is about the maturity. So then are the imaginations and dreams you are constructing, do they meet the reality we are in? Because reality is shifting, right? So this is the growing up. Saturn being the crone, Venus being the maiden, right? So how do we grow up and into and take a responsibility and authority for our dreams so that as we are trying to figure out how we are going to essentially take back what was taken from us as a collective, we have an idea of where we're trying to go because we can't just keep repeating the same things, right? So Saturn being in the North Node in Pisces right now next to Venus is also to me about a new kind of new leaders emerging when it comes to spirituality as well. Spirituality and religion and who we put our authority into and why when it comes to faith. Okay, so we're going to go back to faith again. Because again, Pisces rules the deep water. It's spirituality, but this is about faith. Who do you put faith in and why? And it's a time of change. The North Node brings in new things. It's a new start, a new 18-year start. Saturn meets it, Venus meets it. And then what happens? The Pope is gone. The Pope passes, right? So a figurehead that is the representation of a long-standing religious institution that is also a heavy institution that helped construct and create the modern era and used right? The same ideology to justify the dehumanization of people that justify the economic basis of this United States. This is the plantation economy, y'all. Okay. This is the plantation economy. We cannot talk about why we are here if we do not acknowledge how we got here. This is also what's going on in the air as well. Because the origin stories don't make any sense, the figureheads that we were relying upon no longer have the same kind of hold. So then who do we put our authority and faith up to, and why? Because this will be a crisis of faith. The crisis of faith is already here. Why? Because Neptune made its way out of Pisces, and I've been talking about this for a while, is now in Aries. So we are having the deep waters dry out. The things that were nebulous before, the concepts and ideas and ideologies that we bought into that we were kind of glamored with, are drying out and being revealed. All right. This is also the energy, like I said last week, of new leaders trying to emerge. And all these new leaders ain't going to be quote unquote good, right? There will be new charismatic leaders emerging because people are going to be looking to who to put faith in. And this is the thing, y'all. I am a firm believer in believing in you by finding the you and having you lead so that the self leads and selves can come together in collectives. But the problem is a lot of folks really do want to be told what to do because we have been conditioned and trained over centuries to give our authority up to something or somebody else. This is Christian patriarchal God. Right? This is the Christian white God that transmuted and translated itself into the foundations of these modern nation states through these origin stories that are now being disrupted and broken. So we got to rewrite the story. We got to rewrite the script. Before we get there, we got to sit in what needs to be broken more, what needs to be let go, what needs to be reassessed. Okay. And this is leading us then into this Mars-Pluto opposition before we get to the new moon in Taurus. So on the 26th, y'all, we get Mars in, what's Mars in? Mars in Leo. Mars in Leo opposing Pluto in Aquarius. It's a straight battle of wills. So Pluto went from squaring the sun to now opposing will. Opposing drive. And Mars is the planet of war, the planet of strategy, the planet of passion, the planet of creativity. Okay, it's a personal planet. Pluto being an outer planet, generational, again, lord of the underworld, death and transformation. Pluto is in Aquarius, which again is the collective. And the collective is facing off against a figurehead. In the U.S., it is Trump. It is that Trump administration in which they are trying to enact and wield their power any and every way. This is what I would call an unhinged Leo energy. When you have a Leo energy that is sitting in its quote unquote shadow, and I really hate using that terminology, but I think that's the best way to explain it, but sitting in its not self, sitting in its performative self, will always have to exert dominance because it wants to be the center of attention, because it has not found its own center, right? They have not found their own center, so they are searching for it externally, and they will grab power. So now we are at battle at wills. The collective is being asked to ask ourselves how much we will take and why. So right now, what's going on? As of I'm recording this on the 22nd. We have been told in the U.S. that if you have defaulted on your student loans, that the government will start garnishing your wages starting next month. What is it, May 3rd or 5th or something like that? And that's going to affect about 5.3 million borrowers, okay? Now, this has been a long-standing contention in Congress, in the president's office itself, in public debate about student loans, in this idea of responsibility and paying things back. And so now the Trump administration currently, which is the same administration that helped alleviate and gave borrowers more time during the initial lockdowns that then Biden administration continued on, is now saying that people are defaulting and that they're essentially being crooks. And so they need to go after these people to get the money back. This is a power play, right? Because this is coming at the exact same time that not only has the new administration taken down a number of government agencies, leaving a number of people unemployed, it is also withholding federal funds that go to universities and other types of organizations and programs that will help the social, We are being shown that the state does not give a shit about us. Do we believe it? We are being told that we have to have a stronger moral authority than the state that we are paying our taxes to, and that they have nobody checking them. That even the checks and balances that we are said to have had embedded within the so called Constitution and the ways in which we do our government are mutant point, because as long as that person in charge decides that they are now the only one in charge, they completely dismantle and make all that mute. So the idea, the safety and security we thought we had with so-called checks and balances, again, has also been disrupted and dismantled. So what do we do? What do we do collectively, right? Because this idea, and I'm gonna do on a little rant, y'all. So let me cook for a little bit. Let me cook for a little bit. As a former person in higher education, right? I was in higher education for a very long time. I went straight out of high school to college. Then I did my master's. I have 2 masters and a PhD in anthropology. And I went into school for a number of different reasons. One, I'm 43 years old, so I'm a generation that was told to go to school. We forget that these institutions are very good at grooming us into doing what it wants us to do generationally. So my generation, old millennials, well, millennials in general, and the younger Gen X, we were fed education as the means of success. And we were told that student loan debt was quote unquote good debt. That makes no sense now, but when you're 20 years old, or shit, when you're 17 years old, being given all of this opportunity to take out money that you have no idea you can pay for or not back, but you are told that this is good debt, that you need to do it so that you can, quote unquote, be successful, right? That's what you end up doing. But then what happened? '08 happened. We had an economic crash. This is when Pluto went into a Capricorn, the beginning of us having to disrupt this idea of safety and stability from Pluto, which will make us go through the underworld and back. We get the stock market crashing. When that happened, y'all, a number of things were going on. One, there were no jobs. Two, there was no ability to get a job. So three, even during the economic downturn, that is when people returned back to education. Because why? We were told that you needed different skill sets in order to meet the current changing economic conditions that were happening in society. We were turning toward tech, right? There was a big boom in getting folks to go back into school. Now, as folks were going back into school, higher ed, universities were cutting. That was a massive cut of positions, of disciplines, of different departments being consolidated, right? Federal funds, especially during 2012 through 14, 15, were heavily being rescinded. I was at the time the director of the McNair Scholars Program, which is a TRIO program, which is a federally funded program. During the Obama administration, we took a massive cut. It was like a 5.3% reduction. Why? Because the Feds decided to bail out the banks and the goddamn big three. So during this time, right, we were already at a crisis that we weren't really grappling with as a nation. People were being told to take on debt in order to move their skill set, while at the same time, society itself was cutting out massive portions of the workforce, not actually helping and pumping the money into to create space for people to be able to then make that pivot. We were instead giving personhood to corporations. So as this is all going on, we also have personhood of corporations being enacted. So the state was telling us that we were nothing more than bodies to be fed into the machine, because personhood, who was considered human, was actually corporations. And we're seeing that right now. So then what else happens? So then you're taking out these loans, you're being told it's good debt, right? Now, all of this is going on, and we are socially moving more conservative because the Republican Party's ideology and stance was to push back and target education. So there is this tension. We're being told collectively in the US, good debt, we make education more expensive. Why? Oh, we got to go back in time, baby. Got to go back to the civil rights movement. See, before civil rights, college was cheap. School was cheap, if not free. Why? Because it was only for certain people. The minute they opened up who could come into the academy is the minute education became more expensive. Okay? And when it became more expensive, this was supposed to, quote unquote open up and make things more equitable. The whole point of critical race theory coming in as a concept and as a praxis was because of the lack of movement from the government post the Civil Rights Act, right, into the 70s, not making any real waves on its promises. Academics, lawyers, and organizers came together through the law. This is why this came out of legal studies first, to demand that the state had take responsibility for what it said it would do. Okay, so that's when you start getting more policies really being created and pushed 80s into the 90s. So go to the 90s, right? What then happens? No child left behind. So K through 12, you have a reshifting then of education through the Department of Education in a Republican-run government. This is Bush administration saying that we need to then move students away from critical thinking into testing. So you've got a population that is moving because it does not want to actually live up to what it said it was going to do in making education equitable. You make it equitable by making it also more inaccessible, making people beholden to being in debt so that when they come out of college, even if they have all those skill set, they got to go back into that workforce. Why? To pay off that debt. This is another form of servitude and feudalism, y'all. It's just in the modern era, right? So now, what do we have here? So now in the present day, we have got a bunch of different things colliding. A population that has been purposely made sick and ignorant through the policies that have been enacted post-civil rights era because of the opening up of so-called rights for populations who previously were denied them, while at the same time those populations were needed to maintain the economic base of the goddamn state to begin with. Okay, so then what do? You make a population sick and ignorant so that it turns on its own self, so that you can then get people to buy into that if you aren't successful, it's your personal fault. Not the fact that the structure was set up along the way that every time you actually had the opportunity to open up and come into that door, they move that floor. That floor keeps moving. So then what's going on in the sky? Well, the sky says, y'all, well, fuck it. The floor ain't going to be moving no more. It is no more. It's broken. The structures you thought were solid, the systems you thought were secure are no longer. So we're going into a new moon in Taurus. We're out of eclipse season. All planets are direct. This is a great time to quote unquote manifest. But the sky's saying, but what are you manifesting based upon what your reality is? Because when the new moon comes on the 27th in Taurus, y'all, it's going to be in that conversation with that Mars-Pluto opposition. This is what we call a T-square, okay? It's a T-square forming in the sky. And what this is nothing but tension. And it's alleviating that tension at Taurus. So really, this idea of the kind of opposition and the battle of wills that is happening with the collective and structures and systems of power means that do we actually now know what we need? What do we need to manifest? What do we need to call down? What do we need to create to have a new sense of safety and security? Because this is all in fixed energy. We got, again, Leo, Mars, Aquarius, Pluto, Taurus moon. That is nothing but fixed energy and a tight tension. And even though it's fixed, the sky is saying it's time for change. So then what is changing and why? And this is what I'm going to say here. This is where we have a responsibility, y'all, as a collective. Now, when I say that, I find that people because we are trained this way, get really binary in that. So we say taking responsibility, people automatically think blame. Move the shame and judgment to the side. If shame and judgment are not serving you, if they are not helping you figure out and gain clarity of what comes next, they have no purpose at your table right now. The cost-benefit analysis is not working. Say thank you and put that shit to the side and get real with yourself. Okay? We have a responsibility collectively to ask ourselves, why do we put up with this shit? What is it that we need to plant? Right? If Taurus is safety and stability, security, money, our body, materiality, pleasure, is this shit pleasurable? Do you even know what pleasure is? What would turn you on? Is your body even alive, or are you so beaten down because it is nonstop chaos that you keep disassociating so you really don't even know what you need, right? This is why, again, let's go back to Pisces energy. Saturn is saying in Pisces, this is why you got to take your creativity and your dreams seriously, y'all. We do. This is what I do a lot in my embodied dreaming lab, and this is why I talk about dreaming as strategy so much, because we need new templates. And if the templates we've been shown are nothing but war and aggression and individualism, that doesn't make any sense. Because as humans, like I say all the time, we need one another. We are a species that requires care and nurturing. And we went through that lesson with Mars being in Cancer for so long. It's in Leo now, but the action we got to take is based upon what Mars in Cancer was trying to get us to reflect upon about what do you actually need. Baby, we need nurturing and care. So how the hell do we have nurturing and care in a society that is telling us to not only go back to work, but they are going to make it so impossible so that the work you are doing requires you to do it for free because you have defaulted. So now they're going to create and move what justice is, so that if you are not just to the state, you now become a part of what it is using as its new body. Okay, because Venus rules also justice. And so we have justice at the table somewhat in Taurus. What is just? What is right? What is righteous? Righteous. Let's go back to faith. Who do you put your faith into and authority into, and why? Okay, so this week is really about facing reality, believing your body, and then allowing that to help you dream about what it is you want to see be your future, our future collectively, and the responsibility it takes for us to make that happen, because we have to be the action. So let's flip it. Mars individually. Mars is our personal passion and drive. What are you fighting for and why? What will you go to war for and why? Because we already know what the state will go to war for. We know that real quick, right? So what do we go to war for? And what does war even mean? Because like I said before, the state knows violence, there's opposition, there's tension in the sky. They're fiending for it. They're waiting for it. That's what they know to do, because it allows them to justify them even coming down harder on us. But if we move the whole thing somewhere else, if we move the template, move the conversation, just move the power, move our will to the places that make sense for us, that is disrupted to an authoritarian state that doesn't even have the authority it claims. So it needs us to buy into its fantasy of its authority, y'all. Right? It needs us to buy into its fantasy of its authority. So if you take your authority back, if we take our authority back and reinscribe it, then what do we create? And all planets are direct right now. All planets are direct. So planets being direct right now for a couple of weeks means that there is also the energy for us to do something. But in order for us to do, you got to know what you need. In order for you to need, you need to be in the body. In order for you to be in the body, you got to ground in the feet, right? Pisces, so that you can hear your head and make sure that your head is leading and not somebody else's. All right. Now, I've been talking about this idea of fixed energy, and I want to talk a little bit. Let's do a little astrology 101, okay? About what do I mean by that? So when we're talking about the signs, so these are the zodiac signs. Remember, there's 12 zodiac signs. There are 12 houses. When you look at your astrology chart, y'all, you pull up your astrology chart, you're going to see 1 through 12 counterclockwise, and then you're going to see the sign that is designated for each house. So even if you don't have a planet in a certain sign, you still have that sign represented in your chart. And we can get an idea of how that sign expresses itself by figuring out where the ruler of that sign sits, okay? Now, that's a little bit different. So what does this mean, though, and how we understand the signs? Well, we can look at the zodiac signs in different ways. One way is through their modality. And the modality is essentially how the sign functions. And so we have 3 modalities: cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Okay. So cardinal signs initiate, right? So Aries initiates spring, Cancer initiates summer, Libra initiates fall, and Capricorn initiates winter. And then from there, we have to stabilize. And this is where fixed signs come in. So then Taurus stabilizes spring, Leo stabilizes summer, we get Scorpio stabilizing fall, and then you get Aquarius stabilizing winter. But then also things change, and this is the transitions. This is what we call mutable signs that transition us into new seasons. Gemini transitions us into summer. Then you get Virgo transitioning us into fall. You get Sag transitioning us into winter, and then you get Pisces transitioning us into into spring. Okay, and so when we're talking about, so when you hear things like cardinal energy or fixed energy, that's what that means. Now, people rag a lot about fixed energy. Like, I've got a lot of fixed signs, okay? I'm a Scorpio rising, Leo sun, and Taurus moon. So I got a lot of fixed energy, right? And something you have to remember is that we do need fixed energy. Things do need to be stabilized, right? Cardinal energy initiates things, but if you have a lot of cardinal energy, you may burn out very easily. You're meant to start stuff, but you're not necessarily meant to see it through. That is the point of the fixed energy. It helps see things through, figure it out, experiment, and give the time needed to see if things are working out. And then mutable energy reminds us that you can't just stay somewhere, things do need to change. So there's a point in the flow to these things, right? So right now we are collectively being asked, with all of this, again, kind of red energy in the fixed signs, to be unmoored a bit in what we have been relying upon as our stability. Okay. And I think this is part of the change that the outer planets are also bringing us, as they have all moved signs this year, or will be moving signs this year. So we're in a time of change, y'all. So what is the change that you want to see? And can we take the responsibility to know that we are the change that we say we want to see in the world? That's just not some corny ass line, right? I mean, it could be a little corny, but it's true. But do we know how to bring the change? And do we have the kind of courage to do so? All right, y'all, I think we can end it there. I can keep going. But if you're interested in learning more from me, check out my Patreon. There I have divination study sessions, dream incubators. I post original poetry with rituals, and really am fostering a space to help folks understand and learn how to work with their dreams and then bring those dreams into reality, okay? And I do that through an anthropological and astrological lens, all right? So if you want to learn more with me and just kind of create and commune with me, check out the Patreon again. Tiers start as low as $5 a month, and that actually helps support me being able to do things like this show in the public, okay? And also, if you are interested in getting a reading from me in person, I will be doing many in-person astrology readings on the 26th, so the day before the new moon, in Taurus at Nobody's Darling on the north side of Chicago. For more information on that, you can check out my website, drnicolerouse.com, or my IG at Dr. Nicole Rouse. And you can also book a session prior to that day as well to secure a spot. You can either book ahead of time or drop in that day of, but spots are first come, first serve. So I recommend pre-booking. I don't typically do in-person readings. My readings are done via Zoom online for at least an hour. And there I go through your astrology chart, looking at not just your own energies and how they interact with the structures around us, but also offering prescriptions based upon what your chart says. So if you're interested in the more in-depth reading with me, you can book on my website as well directly, a Journey to Self reading, okay? But next week, again, we're going to be talking about Venus moving into Aries, all planets direct, and what does that mean for us to be able to really work with our dreams and bring those dreams into reality. And I'm going to tell you all something right now. It's going to require you being fully grounded in your body. So work with this new moon in Taurus energy, understanding that it will be some tension. That tension will be felt in your body, but ask your body, what does it actually need and want? And then really listen to it. Let me know what your body says if you want to share in the comments below, okay? If you are watching this on YouTube, please go ahead and subscribe and be sure to check out new episodes. And if you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple or any other streaming services, please leave comments there as well, because I do read them and they do help me know what to kind of plan for in the future. All right. All right, y'all. Keep dreaming, keep exploring, because it's through our dreamscapes that we're able to bring the futures we say we want into the present day. Till next time. I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. Like Michelle sang. The cosmos, where we come from. The light that lit the way for our ancestors in the dark of night, when they had to leave the spaces that tried to steal their breath and life. Reworking, while also learning how to work with the land that was also being worked. A land and people under duress. The trees did not ask if they wanted to participate in such brutal practices. Yet here they were. Here we are. All beholden to a power structure that only knows how to take and never to give, while telling us this is the right way to live. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. As Michelle sang, the cosmos. The cosmos. We'll learn to imagine that freedom lied in parable of the sower that sowed the seeds of earth's seed that wanted to bring humans back to the stars, to start again, to start anew. Remember where we come from and who we are. The stars that lit the way, that guide the light. The moon that holds the tides of the waters. Our connection to earth and land. As above, so below. Yet we don't know, because we have lost the above and the below. So I don't want to be right. I just want to be free. And journey to the cosmos.